Hi, this is Constance Towers, and welcome to TV Confidential.
Number one, it's good to be here after living through an earthquake that was of a sizable magnitude, and luckily for those in the stadium that night was far enough away, even though, of course, a lot of people lost their lives because of the collapsed freeway in Oakland and the section of the Bay Bridge that went down. So it was certainly one of the most stunning things ever. I can't imagine anything like that happening. And there's no way to even think about preparing for something like that. So it just, it took place. And then what you had to do is, as we were on the air, just to kind of collect your wits, stay calm, and then try to figure out how you're going to explain what was going to happen.
Ed Robertson welcoming you to TV Confidential, radio talk show about television. We'll welcome back Ed Asner and Peter Onorati in our second hour. Ed has a new series on USA coming out soon called Briar Patch. He is also bringing his plays God Help Us and A Man and His Prostate to various cities across the U.S. and Canada over the next several weeks, while Peter Onorati has a new movie that is now available on Amazon Prime. Plus, he will be making a return appearance on NBC's This Is Us later this fall. Ed Asner and Peter Onorati will both join us in our second hour. We'll be able to stay tuned for that. Coming up later on this hour, we will say hello to Jeff Abraham. Jeff is the co-author of a new book that explores an aspect of show business that not too many people talk about. That subject being performers who died on stage in the middle of giving a performance. It is a phenomenon that apparently has happened a lot more often than you might think. We'll talk about that and more when Jeff Abraham joins us later on in this hour. In the meantime, Tony Figueroa and Donna Allen are with us as they bring us This Week in TV History. And Tony's segment, as always, is brought to us by our friends at Story Salon, Southern California's longest-running, regularly performing live storytelling ensemble. For more information, go to storysalon.com. What do you have for us tonight?
I'm going to kind of throw it to you, Ed. October 17th, 1989. We were spectators, the two of us on this side of the table. You were there.
This is the Loma Prieta earthquake up in Northern California. I was at Candlestick Park awaiting the start of Game 3 of the 1989 World Series, the Giants versus the A's.
So it was the Bay Area series.
It was the Bay Area series, and What I remember, if 5:04 p.m., if I remember correctly, was the exact time.
Mm-hmm.
And what I remember most, now Candlestick Park was one of those classic cookie-cutter ballparks that emerged, like Riverfront Stadium. It was sort of shaped like a huge bowl, and you had like 3 or 4 layers of state that went up. But it was an open roof stadium. I remember at 5:04 all of this, and I was sitting in the right field, second level right field bleachers. It was a portable bleachers. They called them the football seats because there was when the 49ers would play football at Candlestick, they would pull them out.
Okay.
That way they would get another 10,000 seats in the stadium. But it was playoff season, so there are extra seats. So it was a safe part of the stadium, but you're sort of in the middle. You have the upper deck and above you.
Yes.
All of a sudden, the stands are rattling, and because it was like 5 minutes away from the scheduled first pitch, most of us figure everyone's just getting jacked up, because we're getting ready because it was. Giants fans were getting ready for the start of the game. I looked up, and not only did I see the left field foul pole wobbling back and forth, I saw the top of the stadium, again, this bowl-shaped structure, wobbling back and forth like a bowl of Jell-O. Mm-hmm. At first, I thought, like I said, it was 50,000 people getting excited, but that was not usual. Then it kind of dawned on us that was not a usual sort of thing. Now, because most of us, it was mostly Oakland fans and San Francisco fans. It was a predominantly local crowd.
Yes.
And having grown up in Northern California, you're accustomed to earthquakes. So even though this was a little stronger than usual, there was not a sense of panic that you might normally sense until we started hearing the reports that were coming afterwards about the Bay Bridge, about the part of the Bay Bridge structure collapsing, about the Embarcadero Freeway collapsing, and you start hearing these other things, and you realize this is not just people getting excited. So, but although ironically, you find out later, Candlestick Park was one of the most maligned stadiums in the history of sports stadiums for a lot of good reasons. That day, it proved to be one of the safest places to be because structurally it withstood the jolt. So if a building is supposed to do its job, it did its job that day. So, but I will never forget that because I still see the top of the structure wobbling back and forth like a bowl of Jell-O.
How long did it take you to get out of the stadium and to get back home that night?
As I recall, I was fortunate. I don't remember whether I took public transportation or if I drove.
Was BART still running?
BART did not go directly to Candlestick Park. You had to take a shuttle bus to downtown. And there are different shuttle buses that would take you to BART, that would take you to AC Transit, that would take you to Caltrans. As I recall, I think I took public transportation that day. And as it happened, I also lived about 15 minutes away from Candlestick Park.
Okay. So very good thing.
I was fortunate. I did not have any trouble getting home.
You know, I'm just trying to, I think all of us have had the nightmare. You're in a very public, very crowded place, a theater, a sports arena, and something happens.
Yeah.
And is there going to be panic? And then everyone has to get out. And the disaster has not just happened in that one area, it is the entire area, entire geographical area around you, and you don't know what you're going to face when you get out.
And it wasn't just like you're at a stadium for a ball game. It was the World Series.
It was the World Series. I mean, I do remember within 10, 15 minutes, players from both sides emptied out onto the field, and they looked for their families, and in some cases they brought their families out from the stands onto the field. And there was an air of uncertainty as to what to do.
Yeah, of course.
And when you've got 60,000 people in the stands, there was a sense. The natural instinct is, okay, the stadium's okay, it's just another earthquake, let's go play ball, But and again, without access to the television or the radio broadcast at the time, you're just sort of in a vacuum knowledge-wise. You find out later on that behind the scenes, I think some of the network feeds were out, so they're going by generators, and they're getting a sense of what the pulse of what's going on in the city and what's going on in the Bay Area. And the commissioner of baseball at the time, Faye Vincent, made the right call, which was, no, we're not going to play tonight, and I don't know when we're going to play again. Because when you're finding out that people are stranded, public structures such as bridges are collapsing. I know, even though this is a big deal, perspective is everything. And so the World Series was shut down, and the city was more or less shut down for a good several days.
Yes.
I was not working in civil service at the time, but I had friends who were, and it was one of those situations where, okay, your job may have been you were an assistant at the district attorney's office, an assistant at the city attorney's office, but your job that day was to go out to some of the emergency centers and help with overflow.
the gal I was seeing at the time, she was sent out to one of the emergency centers put together at the marina, and were helping provide information or resources to the extent it was possible to people who suddenly lost their homes or were displaced.
Yeah. And I think we also have to remember, especially for younger listeners, there was no social media.
There was no social media. There was no internet.
It took longer for information to discern the information. It took, compared to today, a very long time. All of us as Californians, these days, there's an earthquake, you pick up your phone, you do a post.
Right.
It's just natural anymore.
Yeah. The other thing, going back to this was the World Series, I remember my sister, the nun, was stationed in, I think she was stationed in New York at the time. And she's watching news reports, and the impression, just based on the initial information and the initial footage, the initial reaction was San Francisco had entirely collapsed.
Yes.
Yeah, in Los Angeles, that's what we were getting.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it wasn't, as more information came through in the next hour, couple of hours, you would be, not to minimize the damage of what happened, but you were able to see that, okay, yes, it was significant damage, but it was isolated to certain areas. But again, this is one of those things where perspective is everything, and it doesn't matter who you are, you can still be effective. My friend was telling me the following day, Joe DiMaggio, he lost his home in the marina. Mm-hmm. Bob Welsh, who used to pitch for the Dodgers, and at the time he was one of the starting pitchers for the Oakland A's. He lived in the Marina District of San Francisco. He lost his home, and so he was standing in line waiting for with his ticket, just like everybody else. And so it just goes to show, doesn't matter who you are, you can lose everything in a moment's notice. We are looking back at the events of October 17th, 1989, the day of the Loma Prieta earthquake in San Francisco. Donna?
I remember one perspective during that time that, thank goodness, the World Series between those two teams was happening that night. So many people had left work early. They were off the freeways and were at home or in bars watching the game or getting ready to watch the game. And because of that fact, a lot of lives were probably saved. The Bay Bridge was not packed at rush hour.
Exactly. No, it could have been a lot worse than it actually was. Now, the Bay Bridge was shut down. I think it was, I'm going to say at least 3 months, probably longer. I'm just going off of memory right now. So as you get to the day after, the morning after, you had to find other ways to get to work, depending on where you worked, whether you're coming into San Francisco or coming out of San Francisco. City Hall, there's some structural damage. It took about 1.5 years to renovate completely, and there were a lot of things. But it was 10 days later that the commissioner of baseball, Fay Vincent, and again, he was, and Vincent was not necessarily a popular commissioner, which is one of the reasons I liked him. But his attitude was, we're a guest in San Francisco. And yes, there was talk of relocating the games down.
I remember down
Los
here.
Angeles.
Yeah, I remember that.
There was talk about having them played at either Dodger Stadium or Angel Stadium. But he felt that at some point when the time was appropriate, it would be a boost for the city of San Francisco to resume the series, which they did about 10 days later. Mm-hmm. And I remember you had the cast of Beach Blanket Babylon perform San Francisco as part of the pregame celebrations, and it was a sort of a citywide, stadium-wise cathartic moment that we took a punch in the stomach, and there's a lot of work to be done, and it doesn't minimize the fact that lives were lost and damage. People lost property. People lost property, and life will never be the same. But there was, in that spirit of resilience, we will move on.
So, Ed, Who won the 1989 World Series?
The Oakland A's in 4 games.
However, I think it was a victory for that entire part of Northern California.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the other thing. The A's at the time were managed by Tony La Russa. And now, one of the traditional things of the World Series is players acting like 10-year-olds, with as if they'd never seen a bottle of champagne before in their lives, just celebrating to excess and just squirting all over the place and stuff like that. The A's, and I believe this stemmed directly from La Russa, the A's felt they would celebrate, but they did it very low-key and very privately. It was very subdued. And he felt it was not appropriate to act like idiots when people are still recovering from personal loss and tragedy and whatnot, which I thought was very sensitive.
And I'm pretty sure I remember the end of that game, the applause just resonated forever. And it wasn't just for the A's, it was for the city, the community.
Yeah. I mean, for both teams, and I think the Giants in particular, it was sort of, if they would never publicly say, let's not play the games, but their competitive nature was diminished to some extent because of what had happened.
Yes. Makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But again, we've talked before about certain moments that you flash back to immediately.
And the things that pop into your memory. Yeah. And you look also when this happened, this was a little after 5:04. Mm-hmm. Where was it? We weren't into daylight savings time yet, but the sun was going to go down soon. You'd be operating in the dark. East Coast would be 3 hours later, so it was after 8 o'clock when they were tuning into the World Series. No social media being around there. So potentially if you had relatives on the other side of the country, they might not have heard from you for 24 hours, not knowing what was going, if you were dead or alive, or that extreme. I also remember that with the Northridge quake here, which was at 4 in the morning. You had hours of not being in. We were in the dark. Mm-hmm. So you had hours before the sun came up, but you had family on the other side who did not know what was going on either. I mean, now social media has eliminated some of those issues, but it's very, very scary. Just being in Southern California, I was in the San Fernando Valley. There were people who the jolt was so strong. People in this part of the state, depending on, I was on the freeway. We were hurrying to a friend's place to watch the game, and we were running late. And all we heard was, the game's ready to start. There's been an earthquake there, so the game is delayed. I mean, it was brought from that perspective. We get in, we turn on the TV, and we are watching that there's a certain level of seriousness that is increasing and increasing.
And as I recall, Al Michaels, who at the time was under contract with ABC Sports, so he was the lead play-by-play announcer for the World Series. Because you couldn't get a news team to the stadium because one of the major infrastructures was now out of commission and all that. This was one of his most shining moments as a broadcaster, because he became a news anchor in that moment. He wasn't necessarily trained as a newscaster, but
he's just been through the same earthquake everybody else has been through.
Exactly, but he was. Going back to a few months ago when we had our conversation about Don Pardo.
Yeah,
out of his element in some respects, but he realized he had to be. He was the cord at that point, between the network and the country, and he was reporting information as it was coming in, and providing a sense of calm in an unstable situation. Again, it was one of his best moments ever as a broadcaster.
Yeah.
Tony Figueroa and Donna Allen are with us as we remember how television news covered the Loma Prieta earthquake that occurred near San Francisco on October 17th, 1989. A tragic event that, among other things, interrupted the start of Game 3 of the World Series that year between the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland A's, and put the World Series itself in limbo for 10 days.
We'll talk some more about how network and local TV covered the Loma Prieta earthquake at the end of our second hour. In the meantime, Tony will be back on the other side of the break as we welcome comedy historian Jeff Abraham next on TV Confidential.
Become an advertiser or underwriter of TV Confidential and let our brand help promote your brand. To find out more, go to televisionconfidential.com/advertise.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. By wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers right away. If you're testing your blood sugar 4 or more times per day, injecting insulin 3 or more times per day, or using an insulin pump, call the Diabetic Health Hotline today.
800-712-8002. That's 800-712-8002. Paid for by U.S. Med.
Are you tired of high cable TV rates? Sign up for Dish today and get a $500 bonus offer while supplies last. Plus, lock in your price for 2 years guaranteed. Call All American Dish, your Dish authorized retailer now.
800-296-1251. 800-296-1251. That's 800-296-1251.
Offers require credit qualification, 24-month commitment, early termination fee, and e-auto pay. Restrictions apply. Call for details.
Story Salon is Los Angeles' longest-running storytelling venue. We have live shows every Wednesday in Studio City, as well as solo shows, podcasts, CDs, and several books. Los Angeles Daily News calls Story Salon Gemstones of Narrative. Something new, funny, astonishing. Sunset Magazine says tales tall, tragic, and tantalizing. All of this makes Story Salon one of the most eclectic entertainment experiences available. You can learn more about us by going to our Facebook page or by visiting our website at www.storysalon.com.
Accredited by Guinness World Records, welcome to Archival Television Audio Incorporated, a peerless TV soundtrack archive, preserving the audio from television's first 3 decades, the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, the golden and silver age of television.
For more information, go to atvaudio.com.
Ed Robertson, along with her friend Donna Allen Figueroa, who I understand has a new book out.
Yes, it's entitled Fall Again Beginnings. It's the first part of a 4-part contemporary romantic series set against the background of working actors.
Something that you know a thing or two
well,
about.
You write what you know, and I have been working in the business for several years.
It is not necessarily autobiographical, but it's based on...
Sure, many of the experiences that the actors in my book have, many have happened to me, many have happened to friends of mine. It's not, if you're looking for Valley of the Dolls, it's not, it's grounded in reality.
It is grounded in reality, and it's the first in a series.
Yes.
Called the Fall Again series.
Fall Again.
Which is available as a paperback as well as an ebook and in Kindle at fallagainseries.com.